practice research, using best practices to foster literacy. My case study is over student M. Student M is a 7th grade boy who's frequently absent. His emotional control can be an issue. He does not see the value in instruction and does not like coming to the resource room. He is, however, an incredibly creative boy, and he loves to cook and does really love his friends and cares about people. For the basis of my time and my case study with student M, I chose decoding and encoding as a challenge because those are two of the building blocks of literacy. For the purpose of this presentation, decoding is the process of translating words from print to speech by matching letters to their combinations to sounds they make, and encoding is the process by which a spoken word is broken down into its individual sounds in the act of spelling or writing. Because student M has dyslexia, a learning disability that presents with difficulties in phonological awareness, the process of encoding and decoding is particularly difficult and frustrating for student M. This is because he has deficits which prohibit the awareness of sounds that words make. And when he's expected to sound out or decode a word or put a sound together and encode it, he is very frustrated and challenged with that process. Traditionally, students with dyslexia would be given extra practice with phonics instruction, small group instruction, and phonics games with frequent check-ins on phonics progress. These would be part of their Tier 1 supports in a general education classroom. They would then be pulled out to Tier 2 supports within a small group, which we will talk about a little bit later. However, student M, at this point in time that I have picked him up, is in 7th grade, and so he has been in the resource room for specially designed instruction in phonics since 1st grade. Therefore, Tier 1 and Tier 2 interventions are no longer in place in his literacy instruction. His literacy instruction is solely done in the special education setting with specially designed instruction. And so for his general education classes, we worry more about ways to accommodate around the dyslexia. And so student M has text-to-speech, speech-to-text for writing assignments, spell check. That can be in the form of the computer or an adult. Verbal, repeated directions, enlarged print, and fewer words per page for instructions. Student M is also provided PDFs so that his iPad can read assignments to him. At present, the student has not made the anticipated progress for someone his age, and this is in part due to the disengagement from his instruction, but also the online and learning environment. I mention this specifically because there was a study done in 2018 that had far more impact after the 2020 COVID era that proved that online learning can actually present more challenges when it comes to the process of acquiring encoding and decoding skills, simply because you need such a sequential step-by-step physical learning environment for the multisensory instruction required for encoding and decoding, and that cannot be successfully adapted and replicated in an online learning environment because of the nature of dyslexia and the gaps in the phonological awareness. That is really hard to replicate and communicate through an online learning environment. So given the online nature of 2020 to 2022 for our school district, gaps in student M's progress could also be due in part to the disruptive COVID instruction. However, in his literacy instruction now, student M is having a difficult time re-engaging with phonics. He is currently in what we would call Tier 3 interventions or specially designed instruction with Wilson Reading and the Seeing Stars program. Wilson Reading is a district chosen program because it has a basis for education from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade so that you can prove fidelity with our program. And Seeing Stars is actually an Orton-Gillingham based program. There's a lot of research into Orton-Gillingham and its effectiveness on the use of symbol imagery as a reading foundation. And this is especially true in students with dyslexia and autism. So student M has a prescribed curriculum of Wilson for 30 minutes 4 times per week and a prescribed curriculum with Seeing Stars for 30 minutes 4 times per week. I do want to note that frequent absences do disrupt this, and at present his instruction is down to about 2 to 3 times per week due to his absences. In application, Orton Gillingham or our Seeing Stars program is multisensory. It is sequential. It is incremental. You have to overlearn a skill before you can move on to the next skill. It is cumulative. It builds throughout the process and the programming. It is individualized to the learner. So student M's prescribed Orton Gillingham Seeing Stars approach is different from other peers in his classroom. It's based on assessment. It's based on the simplicity of teaching letters and letter combinations to build, and it is explicit. As I stated before, it is a program that has to be overtaught before a student can move on. And therefore, there have been a lot of trials, 5 out of 12 specifically, as mentioned by Ritchie and Goick's research, that have proven it is an effective basis for instruction in phonics. It also is based off the multisensory learning triangle of visual, auditory, and kinesthetic processing to provide multiple pathways for learning. This has been really successful for student M because he is more of a visual kinesthetic learner. The auditory processing can be really hard for him with the dyslexia. And so giving him those other two pathways to rely on when there's a deficit in one has helped him progress somewhat through his phonics-based instruction. And this is true of any student that has a deficit in one. The other two can help kind of overcome and overcompensate. So it's playing to the strengths to fight through the weaknesses and overcome the weaknesses. Orton Gillingham also has a philosophy that you cannot move on before you have proved mastery on the components, and so it's not something that student M is able to push his way through quickly, which I think is some of the basis of his frustration. Student M also, because he is a student in special education receiving specially designed instruction, also receives instruction in the Wilson reading system. As you can see, there are similarities to the Orton Gillingham system or our Seeing Stars system. There are differences as well, and it's because of the similarities and differences that these two programs can coexist quite effectively for a student's reading instruction. Wilson is also done in small group, where student M is doing Seeing Stars one-to-one with the teacher. He's in a group of 5 for Wilson reading instruction, so he also has peers to base some of his acquisition off of, and it is a little bit more of a social learning environment for him. Both of these reading programs require assessment and progress monitoring every 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the student. Therefore, it is a truly individualized, targeted program because a student gets a program or a learning path designed specifically for their needs. Yes, they may be in small groups with others, but those groups are determined by the needs of the students, so they're going to be in an individualized program. Wilson also allows for targeted interventions at the Tier 2 level. Should a student not be identified for special education services, our reading lab and our MTSS or RTI model have adapted components of Wilson and Seeing Stars to try to integrate into targeted interventions. Again, for student M, that is not the case because he is already in specially designed instruction in these two. Student M specifically is currently assessed every 2 weeks due to the lack of progress and to kind of prevent any backslide due to the absences. In September, he was given the WADE, which is the Wilson Reading Assessment, and he was also given the phoneme and grapheme assessments provided by the Seeing Stars program. After every workbook that student M completes in the Seeing Stars program, or every 2 weeks, whichever comes first, he is reassessed. His progress is provided to his general education teachers as well. However, little is done in these classes to support literacy improvement, again, because he is in middle school and because he is receiving specially designed instruction. Most of what's done in the regular education classes is done to accommodate and work with or through his disability, not to intervene or target his instruction for his disability. So, encoding and decoding kind of are proven by student M that they're the basis of literacy. And when there's a disruption in one, reading instruction can become quite challenged. Students with deficits in encoding and decoding should be provided targeted instruction, both within the general education class and later in the special education class should their programming progress to that point. And Seeing Stars and the Wilson Reading Program are both the research-based programs that our school uses to try to increase a student's ability to encode and decode. Both have research that show promising results when taught with fidelity. And both can have components that are adopted to be targeted interventions in a general education setting, and both could have been part of the instruction provided to student M prior to his entry into the special education setting in first grade. After doing a little more research on both programs and after teaching them to student M since September, some of the questions that I'm still walking away with are what methods can be employed when the curriculum is taught with fidelity but progress is still not being made, and what research-based practices could assist to further engage a student who's disengaged himself from the phonics instruction. I asked specifically about curriculum because that is kind of a concern at present of what else can I throw in the mix without changing or taking away from the fidelity of the other two, and how to better work on the engagement of the student when his service provider grid or his specially designed instruction is not assisting him in engaging in the curriculum. So these are the two questions that I will be doing further research into as we continue with our targeted case studies. And here are my resources that I went through in the journals that I read to work on last week's assignment and this week's assignment. And thank you for listening.